Hi, first graders. In this video, we're going to look at an analog clock and how to tell time using an analog clock. So as you can see on the screen, I have a big clock, and these clocks are often found on the wall. Maybe we have one, and we actually have two in our particular classroom, but I know you'll see them in almost every classroom in the school, and we also see them a lot of times in houses, or sometimes people have watches that look like this. So we're going to look a little closer at what all of this means and what these parts on the analog clock are. A different kind of clock that you might see is a digital clock, and we'll focus on that in a different video. But right now, looking just at an analog clock, which is what we see, we call the front of the analog clock, we call it the face. So oftentimes, like when we look at each other, we look at our face to know about each other. And so you're going to look at the face of the clock to tell what time it is. It's useful information for us, especially because we want to go and be on time for different events that are happening throughout our building or other places as well. So a couple of things that you'll need to know that are really important about an analog clock. So you'll see that there are big numbers around the outside. Those ones represent what hour it is throughout the day. Here we use a 12-hour system. Some places you'll hear of that uses 24 hours because we do have 24 hours in the day, but on an analog clock, you'll see that we do 12 hours. So there's an AM or a morning time and a PM, which means evening or afternoon time. So for right now, we'll just worry about knowing that it's the hours 1 through 12, and then it starts over again at 1. So to go with that, you'll see this shorthand, which is orange on this particular clock. Not all analog clocks have an orange hand like that, but all of them do have a shorter one, and that is going to be the hour hand. So whatever number this hour hand is pointing at is what hour it is. So right now it's pointing to the 11, so it would be the 11th hour of the day. You'll notice also around the clock that there are little tiny marks around the clock. Each one of those represents a minute. So those are the minutes in the hour. And there are 60 minutes within an hour. In first grade, we're going to focus on telling time to what we call on the hour and at the half hour, which we'll talk about more in another video. But for now, we just need to know that each of these represents 1 minute on the clock. So the big numbers are 1 hour. The small little marks there are 1 minute. And so the minute hand, this long one, which is green on this particular clock, is going to tell us what minute it is within the hour. So if we were to count all the way around, there would be 60 little marks all the way around the clock. A quick trick to know is that in between each of the hours, there are 5 marks. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So an easy way to count how many minutes it is to count by 5. So we could go 5, 10, 15, 20, 25, 30, 35, 40, 45, 50, 55, 60. Now, one tricky part that we're really going to focus on today is if the minute hand is on the 12, so it's up at the very top of the clock, then we don't say it is 11:12 because it's not actually 11:12. That big 12 actually represents the hour, and so we're not going to look at that according to the minute hand that's here. Really, this is the 0 mark for 0 minutes. So it would be the 11th hour of the day with 0 minutes. So instead of saying 11:0, we say 11 o'clock. So anytime that long minute hand is at the 12, it's o'clock that we say. So right now the time says 11 o'clock. Let's look at another example. So now if I turn the clock and I put it like this, I'm always going to start when I'm telling time on an analog clock by looking at the hour hand. So the hour hand is the short one. So I draw an imaginary line extending that hand out, and I see that it's pointing at the 2. So it is 2, and that minute hand is still up at the 12. So it is 2 o'clock. Okay? I'm going to show you another one, and I want you to think about what time it is, and you're going to whisper to yourself what time the clock shows. All right, whisper to yourself what time it is on this clock. So if again I look, I start with the hour hand, it's pointing towards the 5 if I extend that out, so it's 5. And the minute hand goes to the 12, which we say o'clock, so it is 5 o'clock. Let's try one more. I'm going to move it around. See if you can tell what time it is. Right, it's 9 o'clock. That hour hand is pointing towards the 9, and the minute hand is at the 12, so we say 9 o'clock. All right, now I want you to pause the video and go get one of our clocks at the back of the room that you can use and manipulate. And I'm going to tell you a time, and I want you to make your clock tell what time it is that I say. So pause and go get your materials, and then we'll go back together. Okay, now that you have your clock in your hand, I'm going to tell you to make your clock say a certain time, and I want you to check it with mine in a moment. So right now, I want you to make your clock say 7 o'clock. Pay careful attention to the short hand, which is the hour hand, and the long hand, the minute hand. So that short hand tells us what hour it is, so there really makes a difference. We don't want to mix those up. So if we're making it say 7 o'clock, I'm going to move my hour hand to the 7 and my minute hand up to the 12 at the top of the clock, which is the top of the hour, so we say 7 o'clock. Let's try one more. Make your clock say 2 o'clock. If you need to pause the video, you can pause the video and then play when you're ready. So again, thinking about my hands, I'm going to go at the short hand first, which is the hour hand. And if it's 2 o'clock, I need it to point to the 2. And then if it says o'clock, that means the hour hand is pointing up at the top to the 12. So it would be 2 o'clock. So hopefully this gives you an idea of telling time on an analog clock. In another video, we'll talk about the digital clock as well, and looking at some other times that you can tell on a clock.